really delicate balance. Sometimes, if the tree's on the cusp, you can induce vigour. Trees are very well adapted to dealing with one kind of stress, so they can deal with a drought stress or they can deal with a heat stress. But when we have a combination, this is what we've witnessed this year, and that's when they really do struggle. These are quite thin bark trees, and that's what happens.
I just thought that was an aging process for trees.
The aging process, some of that's growth, but that isn't, because it hasn't healed underneath, and that branch is more likely going to be dead in the spring. It's all died. So these will be the sort of things we won't understand and see until the spring when you start to see it. This is one of the buckeyes from North America. This tree actually went into drought just very quickly, and it was more to do with the heat as well. We had such intense heat, done a lot of damage to the leaves, and then the tree was still trying to function as a hydraulic system, and it was losing too much moisture. So it went into what we would call an early dormancy. So it just went, I cannot deal with this stress anymore. I'm going to throw all my foliage and all my leaves to reduce the water loss, and I'm going to sit it out and wait until next year. The risk we now have is how this tree then, how much energy it's stored for next year. So we can see now, if we look at this tree, we've got lots of twig dieback. And that's, for me as an arboriculturalist, this is one of my key indicators that you start looking at to look at the viability of a tree. What we've seen is a very drawn out, diluted autumn colour this year. So some trees have gone into really vibrant colours because they're breaking down those sugars in the leaves, and they've got enough energy, and that's probably because they're more climate suitable. So they've had a really good flush. The trees that have struggled are rather like this tree itself, gone into early dormancy. We don't see any autumn colour, and things like the oaks and some of the elm trees, they're still very green and holding on to their leaves. They're trying to make the most of this period. With these warm temperatures that we've had, which are very unusual for October, they're now making the most of that. They're doing all their growing, and they're trying to store enough energy in order to recoup what they would have lost in the summer when they were starting to slow down their systems. Well, when you go to a dentist now, you get a lot of Eastern Europeans, because British people don't do it, because the money's so poor. Lord did it. We will see we have to remove trees. They will try to produce buds, and sometimes what's often common is they will push out little leaves, and those leaves don't establish, and the tree doesn't have the energy to keep pushing those leaves to go to maturity in order to replace that energy. So we're going to see lots of tiny leaves. Some won't establish, and that tree will unfortunately die. And that's what we're looking at. But we need to understand this, and it's such an important process going forward to understand truly the effects of climate change, but how we can adapt tree species selections in order to try and build some resilience in landscapes.
Other plants, you know, that originate around the Mediterranean, thought fantastic. You know, this is their kind of climate. So, I mean, the amazing thing about gardens like Kew is that they have plants from all kinds of geographical and climatic types. So they all respond differently. So we can learn a huge amount. There are trees like holm oak, you know, the Mediterranean oak did very well, and plants like this, actually, salvias did really well. But there are other plants, things like some of our more cultivated roses, you know, they don't really like it really hot and dry, and they become quite susceptible to some diseases as well. Tomatoes, people who garden tomatoes will know that they don't particularly like drought and very, very hot conditions. So it's about, you know, planting plants that enjoy the kind of climate we're moving into and the kind of weather we've had this summer.
what we're looking at is looking at those areas and those ecotypes, those dry areas where we know common beech is surviving, to seek those seeds to bring them back to Kew, so we can then have a replacement, and they were just replaced with a different genetic type. It's still common beech, but it's a new genotype from a new ecological climate zone where it's more adapted. So hopefully we can build in some resilience in that way.